What do you think? Looks okay to me. I wonder what it tastes like. Hey, it's Tim, and today I'm making thin crust whole wheat pizza from Bread Illustrated by America's Test Kitchen. You'll find this recipe on page 184, and this comes together really quickly. It's a food processor made dough, and it uses only the ingredients that you see here on the table. There's olive oil, honey, 2 kinds of flour, bread flour and whole wheat flour, rapid rise yeast, salt, and then water that we're going to make very cold by putting some ice in it. And the ingredient amounts will be in the recipe in the description. And is it a law that when I say in the description I have to go like this? I don't know. Seems like it. So into the bowl of a food processor, we'll put the whole wheat flour, which is just over 4 ounces. It's 117 grams. And then bread flour, and that's about 2 3/4 ounces, which is about 78 grams. And then we're going to add 3/8 of a teaspoon of yeast and honey, 1 teaspoon of honey. That's a teaspoon. At least as far as I'm concerned it is. Now we're going to pulse that, get the dry ingredients combined, and then we're going to add the iced water. And so I just took 5 ounces of water, which is about 148 grams, and I added a bunch of ice to it, so it's colder than tap water. And just pulse that to combine. And we're going to let this rest for 10 minutes. Just by itself. That'll give the flour a chance to hydrate. The last recipe I did using this food processor technique, I didn't let it rest for 10 minutes before I added the salt and the oil. I'm doing it this time because the whole wheat flour really benefits from resting and hydrating this way. So 10 minutes from now I'll be back. Okay, 10 minutes is up, and now we add about a teaspoon of salt and about a teaspoon of extra virgin olive oil, and I'm just going to eyeball that. Let's good enough. Put a little vegetable oil spray in the bowl. This is a fairly sticky dough, but it's going to rest overnight for at least 18 hours. So it's about 6 p.m. local time when I'm doing this. So tomorrow at around noon I could make a pizza if that's what I choose to do, or I could let it sit in the refrigerator for even longer. 2 or 3 days wouldn't hurt. And so that's that. This is going into this small bowl. I'll cover it, I'll put it in the refrigerator, and then when I get ready to make pizza I'll fix the topping, and that'll be the end of it. The oven is heating to 500 degrees and the pizza stone is in it, and in the meantime I'm going to get this dough prepared and we'll get these toppings put on. The toppings are pretty simple. I'm deviating from the recipe that's in the book. I'm using spinach leaves instead of basil because I've got spinach and I don't have basil. And I'm not using the anchovies because I just don't want to. So rather than heat the oil in a skillet and add the garlic to it as the recipe says, what I've done is I've put the minced garlic in about a tablespoon of olive oil, and I'm going to add to that the 1/8 of a teaspoon roughly of oregano and just a pinch of red pepper flakes. And I'm going to pop that in the microwave for just a minute to get that raw taste off of the garlic, and that'll only take a second or two. So I'll just pop that in the microwave for 10 seconds, and then I'll come back and check it. I'm going to add salt and pepper on top of the pizza once the dough is formed, and then these other toppings go on. And so I'll set that aside, and we'll deal with the dough. I'm going to need a little bit of flour. This dough is really moist. It's really hydrated. Now, this recipe makes a 13-inch pizza, but I used a little bit of this dough. I created a short video of using this same dough, but making a small pizza about that big around in an air fryer. So I don't have enough dough now to make a 13-inch pizza, which is fine, because it's really about doing it, not about, ending up with a particular size or anything like that. But obviously, you can make whatever size pizza you want. The recipe that's in the book is enough to make 2 13-inch pizzas. But as I say, most of these videos, I cut the amounts down because I don't want that much food on hand. You do have to be careful. You don't want to go too low as far as reducing a recipe. Now, this dough is still really cold. I just took it out of the refrigerator, but I'm going to roll it in my hands like this. Just a little bit of flour, as you can see. Pizza doughs typically have got a higher percentage of water compared to a bread dough. Like a sandwich loaf is usually less percentage of water than pizza dough. Dinner rolls would be less, but this is a fairly wet dough. So handling it a little bit like this helps deal with that. You can see all that nice bubble structure that's there. And that's it. We're going to make sure there's enough flour on the counter. And once it's had adequate time to rest, I'm going to form it into a round as probably about 11 inches or so on this piece of parchment. And then I'm going to use this cutting board as a pizza peel. So the parchment goes on top. The pizza dough will be formed into a round, and then it'll slide off of the cutting board onto the pizza stone that's in the oven. I have a steel pizza peel that I could use, but I've already been using this cutting board and it's going to work just fine. This is a smaller pizza, it's not a big deal. And if you didn't own a pizza peel already, you wouldn't have to buy one just to make this. You could use a cutting board, or you could even put the pizza, you could even do it on the back of a sheet tray or a cookie pan or something like that. Buying specialized tools can get out of hand. You can spend too much money doing that. So if there's a way to conserve or even just save space, it's not a bad idea. I'm going to make this right on top of a piece of parchment paper. And right on top of this cutting board. And so now I'm just going to shape this. And you can see how wet and sticky this dough is. But that's okay. And I'm doing the best I can to leave a rim around the edge. Push out from the center so that there's a little bit of a crust on the edge, as you can see. And I'm just dipping my hands in a little bit of flour as I go. so that I can keep my hands from sticking too much to this dough. And this is the kind of thing that it's a good idea to do a little bit at a time with this stretching. You can only go so far. The dough, because of the gluten in it, is elastic. It pulls back in. So a little bit, and then walk away for 5 minutes, and then come back and do a little bit more. And we're getting probably close to that time. So the pizza stone is heating at 500 degrees with the oven, and it's getting close to being almost preheated. This is one of the hottest days of the year where I live. It's going to be 98 degrees here in a couple hours, and so I'm not preheating my oven for an hour the way the recipe says. I'm preheating it until it gets to 500, and then I am going to switch to the broiler on high, and that'll get that pizza stone just as hot as it can be. And then I'm going to throw this pizza in and bake it. If I baked it straight on the stone and skipped the parchment, it might brown a little bit more, but this isn't going to hurt. I think the good thing about America's Test Kitchen recipes is that they really do try to perfect the thing. I'm not really looking for perfection. I'm looking for a pizza that's good to eat, and if it's not, you know, it's not going to be browned like a 900 degree wood-fired pizza oven, right? It's just going to be an approximation of what you can get. But I made one of these. I said I used part of this dough to make a small pizza. I cooked it in an air fryer, and then I finished crisping the bottom of it in a frying pan, and it actually turned out really good. So you know, there's a lot that you can do to modify recipes, and you don't have to treat it as if it's a physics experiment where you're trying to calculate the energy of a muon or a gluon, or, you know, we're not running the nuclear physics lab here. We're cooking pizza, for crying out loud. So that's olive oil and oregano and red pepper flakes and garlic, and now we'll put a little bit of salt, because you can never, food just doesn't taste good without salt. I eat more salt than a lot of people, but I have low blood pressure. I don't have high blood pressure, so I don't worry about it. I get it checked frequently, and if you've got blood pressure problems, take it easy on the salt. But having said that, this recipe would fit nicely with a Mediterranean type diet. So that's about a half an ounce of pecorino romano, and then I'm going to put on the 4 ounces or so of mozzarella. This is whole milk mozzarella. This is going to be a cheese pizza. So I said sort of a modified Mediterranean diet, because it's got whole wheat, so whole grains, olive oil, dark leafy greens. That's all Mediterranean diet. This much cheese, not really Mediterranean diet. Probably more cheese than your Mediterranean diet would call for. So another thing, I'm going to put this is homemade sort of a mock ricotta cheese that I make. Easy to do. So I'm just waiting for the broiler to heat that stone a little bit more, and then this will go into the oven. I'll transfer the oven back to bake at 500, and this will bake for 8 to 10 minutes until it's done. The recipe says to bake the pizza, take it out, and then put the ricotta cheese on top, but that's an extra step that I'm not taking. I'm doing it all at once. I'll be back. Okay, the oven is heated to my satisfaction, and I didn't say this, but the spinach goes down on top of the oil mix before the cheese goes on, so that way, and whether you're using spinach or basil, it's the same difference. Otherwise it would burn in the oven, right? So this melts the cheese on top of it. It's going to cook the spinach and not burn. So there is a pizza. That's approximately 9 minutes in the oven. And let's see if it actually has any kind of crust on the bottom. Of course, it's like frickin' A hot. I'm going to have to let this cool a minute because I can't touch it right now. I pulled it off the parchment, and since the oven was still hot, I ran them back in the oven for another 2 minutes because I wasn't happy with the bottom crust and I wanted to make sure that it was done. So I put it back in there for 2 more minutes at 500 degrees. So a total of about 11 minutes. And it's going to cool just long enough for me to cut it without burning myself on all this melted cheese, and we'll find out if it tastes okay. It sure smells good. So now it's cooled enough to try. I've got one of these. This is actually a commercial pizza wheel. Or you can just use a good chef's knife. So I'm going to use a good chef's knife because it's easier to clean than the pizza wheel. And then I'll show you the bottom of this, and we can argue about whether or not it's crispy enough. What do you think? Looks okay to me. I wonder what it tastes like. If it tastes like pizza, it's a win. Yeah, okay. Nice. Good. The dough is really nice. That long, slow ferment in the refrigerator really develops a flavor and makes it nice and tender. That's nice. Because the dough wasn't worked very much, right? Normally in the dough you're going to knead it in the mixer for 8 minutes to develop gluten, but this you let bread flour and an extended period of rest develop the gluten. So it's got the chew that you want, but it's still nice and tender. Thin crust, whole wheat pizza. Thanks for watching.